Circle Unbroken by Margot Thieves Raven, pictures by E.B. Lewis. Now, you've asked me, child, how I come to sew. Well, put yourself in Grandma's arms and listen to the circle tale from long, long ago. Once your old-timey grandfather lived in a village by a fine flowing river across a wide, deep ocean in a faraway Africa. On the hills by the river grew pale stalks of rice to feed the village and the spirits of the land. By the banks of the river grew tall, grassy reeds to weave into baskets and winnow the rice. One day after harvest, when he was no longer a boy, but yet a man, your old-timey grandfather was led by the men who lived in the village to grove in the forest where the palm trees grew. It was their sacred place, the poro brush, not far from the rice and the fine flowing river, where the men beat their drums and the boy became a man. "Can you bring water in a basket?" a masked spirit asked him there. When he answered yes, the men of the village took him to the grove, gave him a name, and taught him all they knew, just as I am teaching you. They taught him how to make ropes and nets and traps, to hunt in the woods and to harrow and hoe, to make drums from logs to pound as he danced, and to sew great baskets to hold the rice. "The baskets start here," they said, and they taught his fingers to talk, to make a knot first, a coil, a circle unbroken. Then his basket grew and grew, circle on circle, coil on coil. And when his fingers talked just right, and the wet season came, his basket held the rain, and the men were pleased, just as I am pleased with you. But the wide, deep ocean held the rain too, and the rain fell bitter as your grandfather's tears, when the slave men came and bound him in chains and stole him from his village to a ship bound for a strange new land. In the port of Charleston, he was put on a stand and heard the auction man cry, "Going fast, going slow, going high, going low." He was sold to a master who owned a great plantation by a long curving river that flowed to the ocean that touched the shores of his faraway Africa. He lived in a shanty shingled with cypress. He worked in the rice fields from day clean to sun go red. But long night after long day, he sewed baskets in the old way, from the bulrush that whooshed and hushed, by the marshes and the river that flowed to the sea. The grasses brought him comfort. His fingers knew their secret. "Never forget," they whispered, as he sewed palmetto strips, in and out, around and through. His circle grew and grew, and his fingers talked just right. His basket was held in the rain, and he remembered from where he came. Now, on a nearby plantation lived your old-timey grandmother, who came, too, from a village across the wide, deep ocean. Long ago, she was not yet a woman, but no longer a girl. The women of the village took her into the sandbrush and their sacred place and taught her all they knew. She learned how to grow a garden of cassava and sweet potatoes, to fish with nets in the river as was low, to winnow rice in the fanner basket, tossing the grains up fast and slow. And she learned to sew small baskets to hold treasures of her hut, ginger, palm fruit, and koala nuts. And when her fingers talked just right, each coil touched so tight, her basket held the rain. One day in the shadow of the big house, your old-timey grandfather wed your old-timey grandmother, and they had children, and the baby slept in the sun like Moses' basket while the field work was done, And when the babies cried, your old-timey grandmother sang to them, soft as gray moss and low as the going-out tide. When those children had children, and those children too, till one day the Yankees came with cannons, sounding, pounding, booming over the land. "What's coming, Grandma?" the yard children cried. "Freedom," she said. And the Lapp children watched as the sea of blue coats went marching by, while the basket children lay, looking up, not knowing that everything was changing like clouds blowing in the sky. Now it was the times after slavery, when your great-great-great-grandfather worked shares on this land of marsh, sea, and sky, where the creek beds rose high on the old rice fields, melting away like shadows into shade. He built a boat of wood and took it to the sea, far past the shores where the sweet grass grows. Rowing in, he had fish for his family and the fish to sell. Then long night after long day, he told children tales of Burr Rabbit and Burr Fox, till their laughing eyes danced like sunlight on the water. Stars above the creek. Your great-great-great-grandmama heard the stories too. Next day, she carried fish and wares to the market, and the basket she made, toting her burdens and cares high on her head, and the circle went out and out like the stones that milled their corn, and the net that caught their shrimp, and the ring shout their praise that praised their Lord, just as I give you praise for. Then their children had children, and their children too, until one day across the great wide ocean a war began. The men of the island went away like the tide, while the women waited and sewed long night after long day. Then the men came home again, and the bridge builder came too, tying islands to the land with steel arching hands. "What's coming, Grandma?" the yard children cried. "Tomorrow," she sighed, and the porch children watched as the bridge brought cars, and the cars brought people, and the basket children lay looking up at the sky, not knowing the old ways were leaving as fast as the cars passing by. But some folks at night sat around the lamplight, showing the younger ones the road ahead. Over and through, the new hands talked to old friends, the bulrush and sweetgrass, palmetto and pine. Then those children had children who put up wooden stands to show their baskets along the highways and in the marketplace, where the tourists came through and thought the beauty of the old basket was something new, just as my baskets are new to you. While the women sat behind their stands, their sacred place, sewing and sharing with daughters all they knew, the men took the boys to their sacred place, the dunes and the marshes by the creek and the sea, to cut the bulrush and to pull the sweet grass and dry it in the sun as it had been done. And so it always has been, time flowing like a river, circle going out like the pebble in the pond, until I came along, your mama and you. And time has come now, child, for you to learn the knot that ties it all together, the circle unbroken, and when your fingers talk just right, that circle will go out and out again, past slavery and freedom, old ways and new, and your basket will hold the past just as surely and tightly as my arms now hold and circle you.